So let's get into a very important discussion. Obviously, it's still one that holds a global interest, and so many are weighing in. We saw over the weekend, many held their breath when they saw the drone attacks, missiles coming in from Iran. The first time Iran got involved in such a direct way, they would have obviously used their proxies over the years, but this was a watershed moment. And of course, it came via at least Iran's response really to Israel's attack on their consulate in Syria, the capital Damascus. And I'm thinking here this was probably done to appease the home audience, the Iranians. It was greeted, and I guess we saw the footage. People were jumping and sharing and having a time in the streets based on the attack. Now, the damage was minimum, but nonetheless, it was the message. What does this signal? Is this a new turn? We're hearing the US and others asking Israel to not retaliate, to hold their hand. So let's really get a perspective, because we have with us on the Zoom line the Israel non-resident ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, His Excellency Itai Bardov. He's there on the Zoom line. Your Excellency, good morning.
Good morning, Jason. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Good morning. And with us, indeed, great to have you, and multidimensional security expert, global multidimensional security expert. Great to have Mike Singh back with us. Mike, great to see you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Let me start with Your Excellency Bardov. Am I correct in saying that what happened over the weekend was really, in a way, to appease the Iranian audience, the domestic audience, to give a response, as it were, based on Israel's, bombing of the consulate in Damascus?
Yes, I'd like to address that point first of all, because first of all, Israel never took any responsibility for that bombing. But I have to say that this narrative of it took place on a consulate is a little bit misleading. Those who were killed in that bombing were all the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps members, generals, and soldiers. It was a headquarters that was adjacent to the consulate, but the consulate was not affected. It was a complex where the headquarters of the IRGC, where from that area, they were managing all the weapons being transferred from Iran to Hezbollah and to Hamas. That general that was killed was one of the masterminds behind the October 7th attack. So just want to clarify that, because it is very different to what Iran did, for instance, in 1994 when it bombed the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires and destroyed the whole building, killing civilians and diplomats. So just wanted to stress that point. And now, secondly, I wouldn't say that this is an attempt to appease, because when you fire 170 UAVs, the exact same drones that are being used by Russia in Ukraine that has caused immense devastation, firing 120 ballistic missiles, 30 cruise missiles towards the territory of another country, that is not just an act of appeasement. That is a blatant act of war, and the intent was to create massive damage, bring a huge number of casualties, and it is only thanks to Israeli high capabilities and also to the assistance of our allies in the region and from outside that we were managed to intercept 99% of the projectiles of these missiles and drones. But it's, Jason, I'd just like to give like an analogy. It is like if someone is, God forbid, someone is firing towards you from his weapon, a criminal, and you're hiding behind a wall and you weren't hit because you were hiding behind the wall, doesn't mean that the person who tried to kill you, was shooting at you, did not commit a heinous crime that needs to be punished for it.
Well, I'm seeing, and I guess we could have Mike coming at some point in time, because when we watch the geopolitical climate, so many countries, including the US, who we know it's a strong ally to Israel, they and all, Mr. Biden, President Biden is suggesting, listen, hold your hand, don't retaliate, and if you do, we're not going to really back you as it pertains to this particular development with Iran, because I would imagine to get tied in now to the Iranian side of it, many kind of trying to ease away from that development. I'll probably let Your Excellency respond to that, and then Mike, you could come in and give some perspective. Let's look at the geopolitical development.
So sure, I want to say we are very grateful to the Biden administration, to President Biden, but to other allies from Europe and from the region itself, which I'm sure you're fully aware, that had supported or helpful in preventing some of the projectiles from reaching Israeli territory. Cool's head are prevailing. The Israeli cabinet is discussing the appropriate way of reaction. This is the Middle East. You have to remember, if you just disregard what happened, this might send a very wrong message to Iran, to its proxies, because Iran has many proxies, terrorist organizations that are being funded by Iran in the region. It can send a very, very wrong message. But I can tell you, we are in close coordination with President Biden and with his administration. We're not going to be surprising the administration, but we're not asking them also to do the fighting for us. If Israel will react, it will be Israel's reaction, because Israel was the one who was attacked. Israel had more than 300 missiles and drones fired towards its territory. So I think there's an understanding in that. Of course, we are friends and allies, and every one of our partners can voice their concern or what their opinion is, but they also understand that Israel has to do whatever is needed to be done in order to protect itself.
Let me ask Mike to weigh in. Any recommendations? Because there is a call for ceasefire. There's a call to hold your hand. World leaders are telling Israel to hold their hand as it pertains to Iran. And of course, there's that call for ceasefire with the ongoing Gaza conflict at this point in time. Just some recommendations from you, Mike, from the geopolitical lens.
Thank you. Well, let me say the ambassador has done an excellent job in outlining the core security issues and challenges and legitimate security issues for the state of Israel. But he spoke about proxies, and I like to talk about that. Less than 10 miles from your shore is a mecca, a hotbed for terrorism, illicit flows of drugs, narcotics, you name it. I'm speaking here of Venezuela, which covets 3/4 of Guyana's territory. There are literally thousands of Iranian Republican National Guards, or Revolutionary National Guards, as you call them, in Venezuela, supplemented by forces of Hamas and Hezbollah. They've been there for over 10 years. They guard the gold production and uranium facilities. Venezuela has been exporting uranium to Iran, which they've been enriching for their nuclear program. And in that way, Venezuela is a direct contributor to many of the problems in the Middle East. Venezuela has been on a buying spree of arms from Russia, from China, from Iran. Iran has the Shahid drones that we know for a fact has come into Guyana's airspace. Guyana is a small country. It's facing an existential threat by a larger, aggressive neighbor, much the same way the state of Israel is surrounded by very aggressive and belligerent neighbors. So there's some parallels between Guyana and Israel. The difference is Israel has the capability and the support to defend itself. In the case of Guyana, we don't. Guyana continues to rely on the UN and the World Court and public opinion, but I think that's a foolish thing to do. Guyana needs to spend more on its defense. Some type of strategic deterrence is needed. Sadly, a number of Caribbean leaders, Rav Gonsalves, Mia Mottley, Prime Minister Rowley, and others, foolishly took President Ali of Guyana to meet with the Venezuelan dictator and thug Nicolas Maduro in St. Vincent, and they signed a useless piece of paper known as the Argyle Agreement. Today, we all wonder not if, but when Venezuela is going to invade Guyana. And Iran will use its proxies in Venezuela to terrorize and intimidate and destabilize countries in Latin America that are perceived as being friendly to the U.S.
Well, Mr. Singh,
thank you.
Thank you for that. And I guess you brought it back to the regional development. Let me just have the closing remarks from Your Excellency Bardov. There's a famous calypso here in Trinidad. The chorus says, "How many more must die?" I'm trying to think here, at what point will this ceasefire that many are calling for become a reality? What's the feeling and the word you're getting on the ground?
Well, you know, Israel has been going through a really difficult time since October 7th. We are deeply, deeply concerned for the well-being of the 133 hostages being held by Hamas, by a terrorist extreme organization, being held in tunnels and bunkers in conditions that are just unimaginable. And we assume that out of the 133 hostages, 35 are dead and the rest are alive. But when I say assume, it is because Hamas is not even providing any information about who is alive and who is dead. And I'm talking about babies and children and elderly people, young women who we know are being raped in conditions that are just really horrific. So this can be over in an hour. Once the hostages are released and Hamas gives up its weapons and is no longer a threat to Israeli citizens like it was on October 7th when it murdered more than 1,200 people in one day, that is when this will be over. We don't want this war. We did not choose this war. It was forced upon us. And we really hope, I mean, I think I speak for every Israeli and definitely for the government, we want this to be over. We definitely want this to be over. And in the same time, in contrary to what Hamas did, we are doing everything we can in our power to avoid harm to civilians or to those who are uninvolved, to supply humanitarian aid. The amount of humanitarian aid entering Gaza, pouring into Gaza, is larger than the amount of food that was entering Gaza before October 7th. We're working in coordination with international organizations, with other governments, in order to provide all the humanitarian aid, food, medicines, supplies that is needed in Gaza. But we cannot give up, we cannot stop until all the 133 hostages are back home. It has been more than 6 months. The Red Cross has not visited them. We do not know what their situation is. Are they receiving medical care? What are they eating? All we know is that from the hostages that were released, the conditions are unbearable, and the young women who are being held captive are being raped and sexually abused. And we are deeply concerned about this. Your
Excellency, thanks for coming on this morning. Of course, Mike Singh, are always great to have conversations with you, and I'm sure at some point we'll get a chance to, delve in some more. We've run out of time, unfortunately, but we all pray for a ceasefire and for peace in the Middle East.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All the best. Let's continue. After the break, we get some details concerning Angostura. 200 years and counting. Their celebration continues. There's going to be a grand global distributors forum. We welcome the CEO of Angostura and a special guest. They join me to give some amazing details. They're up